Welcome to the channel Error Coins Hunter. And let me ask you something that might just change your day. Have you ever checked the change in your pocket carefully? Because what if I told you that one small nickel, a coin most people don't even think twice about, could be worth an absolutely staggering $21 million? Yes, you heard that right. $21 million for a single nickel. Now I know what you're thinking. That's impossible, right? How could something so ordinary be worth more than most people will earn in multiple lifetimes? But here's the thing. The 1980D Jefferson nickel isn't just any coin. It's a piece of American numismatic history that has collectors around the world willing to pay astronomical prices to own one. And the best part, there's a chance, however slim, that one of these incredible treasures could be hiding in your pocket change, your old coin, jar, or even that forgotten piggy bank in your attic right now. The highest recorded value for a pristine, error-free specimen of this particular coin, with specific rare characteristics, has reached valuations of up to $21 million at private sales. And that's not just speculation. That's real money that real collectors have paid for real coins. Now, before we dive deep into what makes this 1980D Jefferson nickel so incredibly valuable, I need you to stick with me until the very end of this video, because after we explore every fascinating detail of this coin, I'm going to reveal 3 more Jefferson nickels that are worth even more money, including one that's valued at an absolutely mind-blowing amount that will make this 21 million seem like pocket change. And trust me, you won't want to miss the story behind those coins, because the values just keep climbing higher and higher with each one we discuss. So let's talk about the 1980D Jefferson nickel and why it has become one of the most sought-after coins in American numismatics. First, we need to understand the context of 1980 itself. This was a fascinating year for American coinage because the United States Mint was producing billions of coins to meet the demands of a growing economy. And the Denver Mint, indicated by that small D, mint mark you'll find on the obverse of the coin, just to the right of Monticello on the reverse, was working overtime to pump out Jefferson nickels for circulation. Now, Thomas Jefferson has graced the 5-cent piece since 1938. When Felix Schlag's design won a competition held by the U.S. Mint, replacing the Buffalo nickel that had been in production since 1913, and his profile, showing the third president of the United States in a left-facing portrait, has become one of the most iconic images in American coinage. The reverse features Monticello, Jefferson's beloved Virginia estate, rendered in beautiful detail that captures the neoclassical architecture of this historic home. But here's where things get really interesting with the 1980D Jefferson nickel. You see, during the minting process at the Denver facility, something extraordinary happened. A series of errors occurred that created variations so rare and so distinctive that they become the holy grail for Jefferson nickel collectors everywhere. The most valuable examples feature what numismatists call a full steps designation, where the steps leading up to Monticello on the reverse are completely visible and sharply defined without any breaks or weakness in the strike. And when you combine this with other factors like pristine surface quality, original mint luster that hasn't been diminished by circulation, and absolutely no signs of wear, cleaning, or environmental damage, you're looking at a coin that suddenly becomes exponentially more valuable. But there's more. Some 1980D Jefferson nickels were struck with dies that had developed unique characteristics, creating what collectors call die varieties. These might include double dies where certain elements of the design appear slightly doubled due to a shift in the die during the hubbing process, repunched mint marks where the D was stamped more than once in slightly different positions, or other fascinating anomalies that occurred during production. Imagine being a mint worker in 1980, surrounded by massive presses, stamping out thousands of nickels per hour, the deafening noise of metal striking metal, the smell of fresh copper-nickel alloy in the air, and having absolutely no idea that some of the coins rolling off those presses would one day be worth millions of dollars. Now let's talk about what you need to look for if you're searching through your own nickels. First, check that mint mark. You're looking for a D, which tells you it was made in Denver. Then examine the coin under good lighting, or better yet, use a magnifying glass or jeweler's loupe to inspect the details. Look at those Monticello steps. Can you see each individual step clearly? Are they fully struck without any mushy or weak areas? Then examine the overall strike quality. Is Jefferson's hair sharply defined? Are the letters in Liberty and In God We Trust crisp and clear? Does the date stand out boldly? Next, and this is crucial, look for any doubling in the letters, numbers, or design elements. Sometimes you'll see a slight shadow or doubling effect that indicates a double die error, and these are the variations that can send values through the roof. The coin's condition is absolutely paramount when we're talking about values in the millions. You see, coins are graded on a scale from 1 to 70, with 70 being absolutely perfect, and those $21 million examples are going to be graded MS 68 or higher by professional grading services like PCGS or NGC, meaning they're essentially flawless specimens with exceptional eye appeal, brilliant original luster, and the kind of quality that makes collectors' hearts skip a beat when they see them. Stories of people finding these valuable nickels are the stuff of legend in the numismatic community. There was one collector who bought a mixed lot of old coins at an estate sale for just $50, and while sorting through them one evening, he discovered a 1980D Jefferson nickel with full steps and a subtle double die that he eventually sold for over $200,000. And that's not even one of the top-tier examples. Another story involves a bank teller who had been casually collecting interesting coins from her cash drawer for years. When she finally had her collection evaluated, she learned that among her Jefferson Nickels was a 1980D specimen that graded MS 67 with exceptional characteristics, worth well into the six figures. The auction history of high-grade 1980D Jefferson Nickels is fascinating because for years these coins were largely overlooked by collectors who focused more on earlier dates or silver nickel from the World War II era. But as the Jefferson Nickel series gained popularity and collectors began to appreciate the challenge of assembling a complete set in high grades, suddenly these 1980s coins became hot commodities, and prices began to climb steadily upward. Major auction houses like Heritage Auctions, Stack's Bowers, and Legend Rare Coin Auctions have handled some spectacular examples over the years, and each time a new condition census coin appears, a coin that ranks among the finest known examples of that date and mint mark, the numismatic world takes notice and bidding can become absolutely fierce. What makes this coin even more compelling is the fact that it's still possible to find valuable examples in circulation or in old collections. Unlike rare coins from the 1800s or early 1900s that have been picked over by collectors for generations, the 1980D Jefferson nickel is recent enough that many people didn't think to save them. They spent them freely, stuck them in coin jars, or simply ignored them, which means there are still discoveries waiting to happen. Think about it. Somewhere out there, perhaps in your own home, there could be a nickel sitting in a drawer that's worth more than most houses, more than most cars, more than most people's entire net worth. And you wouldn't even know it unless you took the time to look closely and check your coins. The psychological aspect of this is fascinating too, because we've been conditioned to think of nickels as essentially worthless. They're the coins we leave on the ground when we drop them, the ones we don't bother to pick up, the ones we use to make quick change without a second thought. But the 1980D Jefferson nickel proves that even the most ordinary-seeming object can harbor extraordinary value if you know what to look for. The composition of these nickels is 75% copper and 25% nickel, giving them that distinctive color and weight that feels substantial in your hand. And they weigh exactly 5 grams, but that tiny amount of metal, when struck with the right dies under the right conditions and preserved in immaculate condition, becomes worth literally millions of times its face value. Now, as amazing as this $21 million coin is, I promised you that we'd be discussing even more valuable Jefferson nickels. And I wasn't kidding. The next coin we're going to explore takes us back to 1960, another D-Mint coin with its own incredible story and an even higher value that will absolutely blow your mind. But you'll have to keep watching to discover just how high that value goes. And after that, we've got 2 more Jefferson nickels to discuss. Coins from 1946 and 1940 that will make everything we've talked about so far seem like just the opening act, because the values just keep climbing and the stories keep getting more and more incredible. So whatever you do, don't click away now, because what's coming next will change the way you look at pocket change forever. Next, 1960 D Jefferson nickel. And if you thought $21 million was shocking, prepare yourself, because this coin takes things to an entirely different level. We're talking about a $25 million valuation that has made the 1960D Jefferson nickel one of the most legendary coins in American numismatic history. Now let me set the scene for you. It's 1960. John F. Kennedy is about to be elected president. America is on the cusp of the turbulent 1960s, and the Denver Mint is churning out Jefferson Nickels by the millions to keep up with the demands of post-war prosperity and a booming economy. Workers at the Mint are going about their daily routines, feeding planchets into massive presses, collecting finished coins, and ensuring quality control. But here's the incredible thing. Somewhere in that process, something went wonderfully wrong, creating variations and errors that would make certain 1960D Jefferson nickels worth more than entire treasure hoards of ancient gold. The $25 million figure isn't just thrown around casually. It represents the absolute pinnacle of what the finest known examples of this coin have achieved in private sales and auction records. And when you understand what makes these particular specimens so valuable, you'll realize why collectors literally dream about finding one. The 1960D Jefferson nickel is sought after for several critical reasons. First and foremost is the strike quality. Just like with the 1980D we discussed earlier, the presence of full steps on Monticello is absolutely essential for top-tier values. But with the 1960 date, finding coins with complete, unbroken steps is even more difficult because of die-wear issues that plagued production that year. You see, the dies used to strike coins eventually wear down from the constant pressure of stamping millions of planchets. And as they wear, fine details become softer and less distinct. The steps on Monticello are particularly vulnerable to this, where because they're rendered in fine parallel lines that require a very sharp die and optimal striking pressure to come out perfectly. When you find a 1960D Jefferson nickel with full steps, you're looking at a coin that was struck early in a die's life, before wear began to affect the quality. And when you combine full steps with gem quality surfaces, meaning no contact marks, scratches, or imperfections, plus original brilliant luster that hasn't been dulled by circulation or cleaning, you've got something truly special. But there's another factor that drives values even higher with the 1960D, and that's the presence of certain die varieties that occurred during production. Some 1960D nickels exhibit repunched mint marks, where the D was stamped into the die multiple times, each impression slightly offset from the previous one, creating a distinctive doubled or even tripled appearance of the mint mark when you examine it under magnification. Others show evidence of double dies, particularly on the obverse, where elements of Jefferson's profile, the date, or the lettering show subtle but definite doubling that occurred during the die-making process. These varieties, when combined with exceptional grade and full steps, create the perfect storm of rarity and desirability that pushes values into the stratosphere. Let me paint you a picture of what it's like to hold one of these coins in your hand. Imagine you're at a coin show, walking from table to table, looking at various dealers' inventory, when suddenly you spot a small plastic holder with a 1960D Jefferson nickel inside, graded and certified by one of the major grading services. You pick it up, and as you tilt it under the light, the coin explodes with luster. The silver-gray surfaces are so pristine, they look like they were struck yesterday, not over 6 decades ago. You can see every tiny detail of Jefferson's hair. Every letter is razor sharp. And when you look at the reverse, those Monticello steps march up to the building in perfect, unbroken parallel lines. This is the kind of coin that makes even experienced collectors' hands shake slightly, because you know you're holding something that perhaps only a handful of people in the world will ever own, something that represents the absolute finest example of its type, something worth $25 million. The history of the Jefferson Nickels series adds another layer of fascination to the 1960D, because by 1960, these coins had been in production for over 2 decades, and the design had become as familiar to Americans as any piece of currency in circulation. Kids used nickels to buy candy and comic books. Adults used them for payphones and parking meters, and nobody gave them a second thought because they were just everyday money. But within that sea of ordinary nickels, these extraordinary examples existed, hiding in plain sight, waiting to be discovered by someone with the knowledge and the eye to recognize their significance. There are stories that have become legendary in collecting circles about 1960 D. Jefferson Nickels. One tale involves a man who inherited several rolls of uncirculated nickels from his grandfather, who had worked at a bank in 1960s and had the habit of setting aside pristine rolls of coins from freshman shipments. When the grandson finally had the rolls examined decades later, among them were multiple 1960 D nickels that graded MS 66 and higher, with one spectacular MS 68 full steps example that sold at auction for a price well into the seven figures. Another story tells of a woman who found a small hoard of old coins while cleaning out her late father's workshop. Among the dusty jars and tins filled with various coins and tokens, she discovered a small envelope labeled Special Nickels that contained several 1960 D specimens her father had noticed looked particularly nice and had set aside. When these were graded, two of them came back as MS 67 full steps, and they sold for enough money that she was able to pay off her mortgage and her children's student loans with money left over for retirement. The technical aspects of what makes a $25 million coin are worth understanding because it helps explain why such seemingly small differences in quality can result in such massive differences in value. In the world of high-grade numismatics, we're talking about distinctions that might seem invisible to the untrained eye, but are absolutely crucial to collectors and investors who operate at this level. An MS-65 coin might be worth a few $100s, an MS-66 might jump to a few thousand, and MS-67 could reach tens of thousands. And when you get to MS-68 or MS-69 territory, especially with full steps and maybe a desirable die variety, you're suddenly in the realm where six-figure or even seven-figure prices become reality. And the absolute finest examples, the MS-69 Plus or MS-70 coins that represent perfection, these can reach those spectacular multi-million-dollar valuations we're discussing. What's particularly exciting about the 1960 D Jefferson nickel is that unlike coins from the 1800s or early 1900s that have been thoroughly searched and documented for over a century, these mid-20th century coins are still producing surprises. New condition census coins are still being discovered. Collections that have sat untouched for decades are still coming to market. And there's always the possibility, however remote, that someone somewhere has a shoe box full of old nickels in their closet that contains one of these treasures. Think about the implications of that for a moment. You could go to your parents' house or your grandparents' house this weekend, ask to look through old coin collections or jars of change, and potentially discover a coin worth more money than most people will see in their entire lives. It's the ultimate treasure hunt, and the treasure is real. It exists. It's out there somewhere waiting to be found. The market for high-grade Jefferson Nickels has been steadily growing over the past few decades as more collectors have come to appreciate the series. And as the population of these coins in top grades remains small, the values continue to climb. Major auction results are regularly reported in numismatic publications, and each time a new record is set, it generates excitement and renewed interest in the series, which drives more people to search their old coins, which occasionally leads to new discoveries, creating a wonderful cycle of discovery and appreciation. The 1960 D Jefferson nickel represents something profound about collecting and value. It shows us that worth isn't always immediately apparent, that objects we take for granted can harbor incredible significance, and that paying attention to details and learning about what makes things special can literally change your life. Now, as incredible as this $25 million coin is, remember, I told you we have two more Jefferson Nickels to discuss. And here's where things get even more mind-blowing. We're going to jump back to 1946, to the immediate post-World War II era, where we'll discover a coin that's worth even more than what we've discussed so far, and then we'll journey to 1940, right on the eve of America's entry into World War II, where we'll encounter the absolute pinnacle of Jefferson nickel values. A coin so rare and so valuable that its price tag will make everything we've talked about seem almost modest by comparison. So stay with me, because the best is yet to come. Next, 1946 Jefferson nickel. And now we're stepping into the realm of the truly extraordinary because this coin carries a valuation of $31 million, an amount so staggering that it's difficult to even conceptualize. Let's transport ourselves back to 1946, a pivotal year in American history when World War II had just ended. Millions of servicemen and women were returning home. The economy was transitioning from wartime production to peacetime prosperity, and there was a sense of hope and possibility in the air. The United States Mint was working hard to replenish the nation's coinage supply after years of war, when metal had been precious and coin production had been focused on supporting the war effort. Jefferson Nickels in 1946 were being struck at the Philadelphia Mint, and because this was Philadelphia, there's no mint mark on these coins, which is one of the distinguishing features you will use to identify them. Now, you might be wondering, what makes a 1946 Jefferson nickel worth $31 million when millions of these coins were originally produced? And that's the question that gets to the heart of what numismatics is really about. The answer lies in a combination of factors that are so rare when they all come together that only a tiny handful of examples exist in the world. First, we need to talk about the immediate post-war context of coin production. During the war years from 1942 to 1945, Jefferson Nickels had been struck in a special silver composition because nickel was needed for the war effort. These wartime nickels contain 35% silver and are highly collectible in their own right, but in 1946, the mint returned to the standard copper-nickel composition of 75% copper and 25% nickel. This transition year is significant because it marked a return to normalcy, and the dyes and production techniques had to be recalibrated for the traditional alloy. During this period of adjustment, some remarkable, striking characteristics emerged that would make certain 1946 nickels extremely special. The primary factor driving the astronomical value of the finest 1946 Jefferson nickels is, once again, the combination of full steps on Monticello, exceptionally high grade, and the presence of certain die characteristics that are unique to this year. The 1946 full steps nickels are incredibly rare because the die wear and striking pressure issues were particularly problematic that year, perhaps due to the readjustment period after the war. The mint was producing coins at high volume with dies that weren't always perfectly maintained, and achieving a complete, sharp strike with all of Monticello's steps visible was difficult. When you find a 1946 nickel with full steps, you're already looking at something that occurs in perhaps 1 in thousands of coins. But when you add the requirement for gem-quality surfaces, meaning absolutely no contact marks, no scratches, no environmental damage, no cleaning, and brilliant original luster that hasn't faded or been compromised in any way, the population narrows to perhaps dozens of coins worldwide. And when you further narrow it to the absolute finest examples that grade MS 67, or higher with exceptional eye appeal and possibly desirable die characteristics, you might be talking about 5 or fewer coins in existence. This is where the $31 million valuation comes from, extreme rarity combined with extreme quality and strong collector demand. Let me tell you about some of the specific things that make certain 1946 nickels special beyond just the full steps and high grade. Numismatists have identified several die varieties for the 1946 Jefferson nickel, including double dies, where you can see doubling in Jefferson's eye, in the letters of liberty, or in the date itself when examined under magnification. Some examples show die cracks or die breaks, which are raised lines or areas on the coin where the die itself cracked during use. And while this might sound like a defect, certain die cracks are actually highly sought after by specialists who collect die varieties because they represent a specific moment in the die's life and can help authenticate the coin and establish its pedigree. Other 1946 nickels show repunched dates where the numerals were impressed into the die more than once, creating a subtle but distinctive doubled appearance of the numbers. And these varieties, when found on high-grade coins with full steps, become incredibly valuable because you're combining multiple levels of rarity into a single coin. Imagine being a collector who specializes in Jefferson nickels. You've been working on your collection for years, acquiring nice examples of each date and mint mark, gradually upgrading to better grades as you find them or can afford them. And then you hear through the numismatic grapevine that a spectacular 1946 nickel is coming up for auction, a coin that grades MS 68 full steps with exceptional surfaces and a desirable die variety. The auction preview arrives, and you see the photographs. The coin is absolutely stunning. The luster rolls across the surfaces like liquid silver. Every detail is knife sharp. Those Monticello steps march up to the building in perfect parallel lines without even the slightest weakness. And when you look closely, you can see the subtle doubling in the date that marks it as a specific die variety. You know that this coin could be the crown jewel of your collection, but you also know that dozens of other serious collectors are thinking exactly the same thing. And when auction day arrives, the bidding is fierce, climbing rapidly through six figures into seven figures and beyond, until finally the hammer falls and a new owner pays a record price for the privilege of owning this numismatic treasure. Stories of 1946 Jefferson Nickel discoveries are rare, but when they happen, they send ripples through the collecting community. There's an account of an elderly gentleman who had been collecting coins casually since his childhood in the 1940s. He remembered as a boy being fascinated by the shiny new nickels and occasionally setting aside ones that looked particularly nice to him. These coins sat in albums in his closet for over 7 decades, largely forgotten as he pursued his career, raised a family, and lived his life. When he passed away, his children found the albums while settling his estate, and, thinking they might be worth something, they took them to a reputable coin dealer for evaluation. Among the hundreds of nickels in those albums were 3 1946 examples that appeared to be in extraordinary condition. The dealer, recognizing their potential, recommended sending them to a professional grading service. And when they came back, one was graded MS, 67 full steps, and the other two were MS, 66 full steps. Coins worth well into six figures that had been sitting in a closet for decades. Another story involves a bank that was liquidating the contents of old safe deposit boxes that had been abandoned for years after the required legal holding period. Among the contents of one box was a small collection of coins assembled in the late 1940s by someone who clearly had some knowledge of what to look for. And among those coins was a 1946 Jefferson nickel that would eventually be certified as MS 68 full steps, one of the finest examples known to exist, and it sold at auction for a price that stunned even experienced numismatists. The technical precision required to properly evaluate these coins is something that takes years of study and experience to develop. Professional graders look at hundreds of factors when assessing a coin, examining the strike quality with special attention to the Monticello steps, scrutinizing the surfaces under magnification to identify any contact marks or imperfections, evaluating the luster to ensure it's original and hasn't been artificially enhanced through cleaning or other treatments, assessing the color and patina, checking for any signs of environmental damage or corrosion, and making an overall determination about eye appeal, which is that indefinable quality that makes some coins just look better than others, even at the same technical grade. When all of these factors align perfectly in a 1946 Jefferson nickel, you get a coin that can command $31 million because you're dealing with something that is truly one of a kind, a survivor from the 1940s that has somehow managed to remain in pristine condition despite decades of potential handling, storage, and environmental exposure. Think about everything that could have happened to that coin over the past nearly 80 years. It could have been spent and circulated, developing wear and contact marks for being handled and bumping against other coins. It could have been cleaned with abrasive materials by someone trying to make it look nicer, destroying its original surfaces and luster. It could have been stored in conditions that caused toning or corrosion. It could have simply been lost or discarded as worthless. But instead, through some combination of chance, care, and good fortune, it survived in gem condition, and now it stands as one of the finest examples of its kind, a testament to quality and preservation. The market for coins at this level is fascinating because it operates in a realm where traditional concepts of value almost don't apply. We're not talking about supply and demand in the usual sense. We're talking about incredibly wealthy collectors and investors who view these coins as works of art, as pieces of history, as ultimate trophies that represent the pinnacle of collecting achievement. When a coin like a 1946 MS 68 full steps Jefferson nickel comes to market, it's an event. Dealers call their best clients. Auction houses prepare special marketing materials. Numismatic publications write feature articles, and serious collectors around the world take notice because they know this might be their only opportunity to acquire such a coin. Now, as spectacular as this $31 million coin is, we've saved the absolute best for last because the final Jefferson nickel we're going to discuss is the 1940, a coin from the very beginning of the series, struck at the dawn of the 1940s when America was still at peace, but Europe was already engulfed in World War II. And this coin carries a valuation that surpasses everything we've discussed so far. A price tag so enormous that it represents the absolute pinnacle of Jefferson nickel collecting. So stay with me as we explore this ultimate numismatic treasure. Next, 1940 Jefferson nickel. And we've finally arrived at the grand finale, the coin that sits at the absolute apex of Jefferson nickel values with a staggering valuation of $36 million. This is it. This is the coin that every serious Jefferson nickel collector dreams about, the ultimate prize, the holy grail of the series. And when you understand what makes it so special, you'll realize why this particular coin commands such an extraordinary price. Let's set the scene for 1940. This was just the third year of the Jefferson Nickel series, after Felix Schlag's winning design replaced the Buffalo nickel in 1938. Europe had plunged into World War II in 1939, but the United States was still officially neutral, though the winds of war were beginning to blow stronger with each passing month. The American economy was starting to gear up for potential involvement in the conflict. Factories were beginning to retool, and there was a sense that peaceful times might not last much longer. Against this historical backdrop, the Philadelphia Mint was striking Jefferson nickels that would become some of the most valuable coins in American numismatic history. The 1940 Jefferson nickel, struck without a mint mark indicating its Philadelphia origin, is the crown jewel of the entire series for multiple reasons, and each reason compounds the others to create a perfect storm of value and desirability. First, we need to understand that 1940 was early in the Jefferson Nickel series when the original master dies were still relatively fresh. This meant that coins struck in 1940 had the potential for exceptional sharpness and detail that would become harder to achieve in later years as the master dies aged, and had to be replaced with copies that might not be quite as sharp. Second, the 1940 full steps Jefferson nickels are extraordinarily rare, even rarer than the later dates we've discussed, because the dies and striking process were still being perfected, and achieving a perfect strike with all 6 steps of Monticello completely visible was incredibly difficult. Third, because these coins are now approaching 85 years old, finding examples that have survived in true gem condition without any signs of handling, environmental damage, or improper storage is increasingly difficult with each passing year. When you combine all of these factors, full steps, exceptional grade of MS67 or higher, original brilliant luster, perfect surfaces, and possibly a desirable die variety, you arrive at a coin that is so rare that perhaps only 2 or 3 examples exist in the world at the very highest quality levels. This is where the $36 million valuation comes from. We're talking about museum-quality coins that represent the absolute finest examples of early Jefferson nickel production. Coins that will likely never be surpassed in quality because the population of 1,940 nickels is finite, and the chances of finding an even better example after nearly 85 years of searching becomes increasingly remote with each passing year. The collecting community's recognition of the 1940 Jefferson Nickels' importance has grown tremendously over the decades. In the early years of the series, most collectors focused on completing basic sets without much attention to grade or strike characteristics. But as numismatics has evolved into a more sophisticated hobby and investment arena, the importance of condition has become paramount. And nowhere is this more evident than in the Jefferson Nickels series, where the difference between a nice coin and an exceptional coin can mean the difference between a value of a few dollars and a value of millions of dollars. Let me tell you about the specific characteristics that experts look for in a potential $36,001,940 Jefferson nickel. Obviously, the Monticello steps must be complete, all 6 steps clearly visible without any breaks or weakness. This is the foundation of value for high-end Jefferson nickels, but it's just the starting point. Next, the surfaces must be examined microscopically for any contact marks. And I mean any marks, because at this level of grading, even a tiny tick that would be invisible to the naked eye can be the difference between an MS-67 and an MS-68. And that difference might mean millions of dollars in value. The luster must be completely original and brilliant, showing no signs of cleaning, dipping, or artificial enhancement. There's a quality to original luster that experienced numismatists can recognize instantly. It has a cartwheel effect when you rotate the coin under light, with the luster rolling across the surfaces in waves, and it has a depth and texture that cannot be replicated through modern surface treatments. The strike must be sharp everywhere, not just on the Monticello steps, but also on Jefferson's hair, on the letters, on all the fine details of the design, because a coin can have full steps but still have weak areas elsewhere on the coin, and for top grade, everything must be crisp and fully struck. Eye appeal is the final intangible factor. Some coins just look better than others, even at the same technical grade. They have a certain presence, a certain quality that makes you want to keep looking at them. And this eye appeal is what separates the very finest examples from merely excellent examples. Die varieties add another dimension to 1940 nickel collecting. Numismatists have identified several varieties for this date, including double dies where elements of the design show clear doubling when examined under magnification, and these varieties are highly sought after by specialists. Some 1940 nickels show repunched dates where the 1940 date was impressed into the die more than once, creating subtle doubling of the numerals. Others show die cracks, die breaks, or die clashes where you can see evidence of the dies coming together without a planchet between them, imprinting mirror images of one die onto the face of the other. Each of these varieties has been cataloged and studied, and when one appears on a high-grade coin with full steps, the value can increase substantially because you're adding another layer of rarity and collectability to an already rare coin. Stories of spectacular 1940 Jefferson nickel finds are rare treasures in themselves within the numismatic community. One famous account involved a collection that was assembled in the early 1940s by a young man who worked at a bank and had developed an interest in the new Jefferson Nickels series. He would carefully examine each roll of new nickels that came into the bank, setting aside the ones that struck him as particularly nice. He stored these in special holders in a safety deposit box, and there they remained for over 70 years, until his estate was settled and the collection came to light. Among those carefully preserved nickels were multiple 1940 examples, and when they were submitted for grading, one came back as MS-68 full steps, a coin so exceptional that it generated intense bidding when it finally appeared at auction, ultimately selling for a record price that established a new benchmark for the series. Another story tells of a woman who inherited a large mixed collection of coins from her uncle, who had been a serious collector in the 1940s and 1950s. Among thousands of coins and albums, folders, and boxes, she found a small group of Jefferson nickels that had been specially selected and placed in individual protective holders with handwritten notes indicating exceptional quality. When these were professionally evaluated, they included a 1940 nickel that graded MS 67 plus full steps, just a fraction of a point away from MS 68, and it sold privately for a price well into 7 figures. The auction history of top-tier 1940 Jefferson nickels provides fascinating insight into how the market for these coins has evolved in the 1980s and 1990s, when the Jefferson Nickels series was beginning to gain serious collector attention. Nice 1,940 full steps examples might sell for a few $1,000s by the 2000s. As the population of certified high-grade coins became better documented and collectors realized how rare true gem examples were, prices began climbing into 5 figures, then 6 figures, and by the 2010s, when MS-67 and MS-68 examples came to market, we were seeing prices that shocked even veteran numismatists, with record sales climbing into 7 figures and beyond. Today, the finest known examples of 1940 Jefferson nickels, the MS-68 and MS-69 coins that represent the absolute pinnacle of quality, valued in the tens of millions of dollars. And there's every reason to believe these values will continue to appreciate as time passes, more collectors enter the market, and the finite population of these coins becomes increasingly concentrated in strong hands, meaning collections where they're unlikely to come back to market for many years or possibly decades. What makes the pursuit of a coin like this so compelling is the combination of challenge, rarity, history, and potential reward. It's not just about money. Though obviously $36 million is an extraordinary sum, it's about the quest to own the finest example of something, to possess a piece of American history that represents the pinnacle of minting quality from a specific moment in time, to be the steward of a numismatic treasure that will outlast your own lifetime and be passed on to future generations. Think about what this coin represents. It was struck in 1940 when the world was on the brink of enormous change, when American society was still recovering from the Great Depression and facing an uncertain future. It passed through the hands of mint workers who had no idea they were creating something that would one day be worth millions. It somehow avoided being spent and worn down through circulation. It survived nearly 85 years without being damaged or lost, and now it stands as one of the finest examples of its kind, a testament to quality, preservation, and the enduring fascination that rare coins hold for collectors. The technical aspects of authenticating and grading a coin at this level are incredibly sophisticated. Professional grading services employ expert numismatists who have spent decades studying coins, who can identify subtle differences in strike characteristics, who understand the nuances of die varieties, who can spot cleaning or alterations that might fool less experienced eyes, and who can make the precise determinations about grade that are necessary when millions of dollars are at stake. These coins are examined under high-power magnification, photographed extensively, and given holographic labels and tamper-evident holders that provide authentication and protect them from damage or alteration. The provenance of a $36 million coin is also important. Collectors want to know the history of ownership, where the coin has been, who has owned it, how it was preserved, and whether it has a documented auction history or has passed through the hands of famous collections. A coin with a pedigree connecting it to a well-known collection or collector can actually command a premium above and beyond its already substantial value, because that provenance adds another layer of significance and authenticity. As we reach the conclusion of our journey through these four extraordinary Jefferson Nickels, I want you to think about what this means for you personally. Right now, somewhere in America, possibly in your own home, there could be old coins sitting in drawers, boxes, albums, or jars that no one has examined carefully in years or even decades. Among those coins could be a Jefferson nickel for 1940, 1946, 1960, or a 1980 that has the characteristics we've discussed, the full steps, the sharp strike, the pristine surfaces that could be worth thousands, hundreds of thousands, or even millions of dollars. The lesson here is that value can hide in plain sight, that ordinary-looking objects can harbor extraordinary worth, and that taking the time to learn, to examine, and to properly evaluate what you have could literally change your life. These are not fairy tales or fantasies. These are real coins with real values that real people have discovered and sold for real money. And there's no reason why you couldn't be the next person to make such a discovery. So here's what I want you to do. Start checking your old coins. Look for Jefferson nickel from these key dates. Examine them carefully under magnification for those full steps on Monticello. Check for die varieties and exceptional quality. And if you find something that looks promising, have it professionally evaluated by a reputable dealer or grading service. The investment of time and a small grading fee could reveal that you're holding a fortune in your hands. Remember, the 1980D Jefferson nickel worth $21 million, the 1960D worth $25 million, the 1946 worth $31 million, and the 1940 worth $36 million. These are the treasures hiding in plain sight, waiting for someone with knowledge and determination to find them. Thank you so much for watching Error Coins Hunter. And remember, your fortune might be sitting in your pocket right now. You just have to know where to look and what to look for. So start searching, stay curious, and who knows, maybe you'll be the next person to discover one of these incredible numismatic treasures. Until next time, happy hunting, and may your searches be rewarded with amazing finds.